The Retaliation. Act 2. The following week felt like being trapped in a ghost version of the office I used to know. My badge still opened the doors, but the glances when I walked in said I wasn't really welcome. Slack messages went unanswered. Every "good morning" I offered came back as silence. When systems lock you out digitally, they're just practicing for when they lock you out socially. By Wednesday, I got an email from legal requesting a clarification interview. Apparently, someone had accused me of destroying files related to the audit. I laughed when I read it, the irony almost poetic. I'd been the one who saved those files. Still, I went to the meeting. 2 lawyers, 1 HR rep, and a table that smelled like cold coffee and anxiety. They asked careful questions, the kind meant to trip you up by tone rather than substance. I answered each one calmly, citing exact file paths and timestamps. When I finished, I slid a USB drive across the table. "Backups," I said. The younger lawyer blinked. "Of what?" "Everything," I replied. That single word changed the temperature of the room. They wrapped the meeting early. An hour later, IT reinstated my access, pending review. By the next morning, the rumor mill had spun a new story. Apparently I'd lawyered up. I hadn't, but the assumption alone was protection. Then, out of nowhere, Melissa called. Her voice trembled through the line. "They're questioning me again," she said. "About what?" "About you. About whether you manipulated data for Colin." It was like watching history repeat, only with different names on the paperwork. I told her to stay calm, to keep her own notes. She whispered, "He's trying to come back." I froze. "Who?" "Colin. He's appealing the termination. Says there was no evidence." The word evidence echoed in my head. Because I had it. Every falsified report, every expense approval, every late-night message he thought he deleted. That night, I stayed up reorganizing everything, turning my messy folders into a clean, chronological narrative. I didn't know who to trust inside the company anymore, but I knew there was one place his influence couldn't reach: the parent corporation's ethics board. Friday morning, I packaged the data with a short summary and sent it from my personal email. Subject line: formal submission, supporting documentation for internal review. Then I went to work like nothing happened. The silence before a storm is strange. You start hearing small noises louder. The hum of lights, the tick of a wall clock, the nervous laughter 2 desks over. By noon, leadership scheduled an emergency call. By 3, half the management team was in the conference room with their laptops closed, faces blank. They didn't announce what was happening, but we all knew. Someone upstairs had seen what I sent. At 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed. An email from corporate legal thanking me for assisting in an ongoing compliance investigation. 2 sentences. No signature. But I exhaled for the first time in months. That relief lasted exactly 48 hours. Monday morning, my car wouldn't start. Nothing suspicious, just a dead battery, but while waiting for the tow truck I checked my inbox on my phone. There it was. A formal notice of suspension with pay pending investigation. Effective immediately. Reason: potential violation of data handling policy. They were moving fast, too fast for HR's usual red tape. This was retaliation wrapped in procedure. For the first time, fear outweighed anger. What if they twisted the narrative? What if the board believed them before they even saw my evidence? Then I remembered that voice memo in my car, the one I'd recorded the night my access was revoked. I played it back, listened to my own exhausted voice saying, "Remember this feeling." And I realized, the person they were trying to erase was still here, still documenting. I drove straight home, opened my laptop, and started writing a statement, not emotional, not dramatic, just factual. Every date. Every retaliation step. By midnight, it was 8 pages long. At the top I wrote, "Timeline of retaliatory actions following protected disclosure. When you put the truth in order, it stops looking like paranoia and starts looking like evidence." I sent it to the ethics board contact who'd thanked me earlier. Then I closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and finally slept. The next morning, 3 voicemails waited: HR, legal, and, unexpectedly, a journalist. The headline the next day didn't name me, but everyone knew. Regional director accused of retaliation amid ongoing compliance probe. The company's PR team issued a statement calling the article misinformed, but the damage was done. For once, it wasn't me under review. The article changed everything, not because it named names, but because it broke the spell. For months, the company's message had been simple: don't look too closely. Now the whole city was squinting through the blinds. By noon, the whispers turned into meetings. Calendar blocks popped up across leadership like warning lights on a dashboard. Security did 2 silent walkthroughs. Someone taped a copy of the article to the break room fridge. It vanished in under a minute, but the damage was done. The headline had already been screenshot, slacked, texted, and immortalized. Late afternoon, I got an email from corporate legal. Please be available for a call at 5:30 p.m. Counsel present. It wasn't a request. I expected a firing squad. Instead, the call opened with a different kind of silence, cautious, measured, the kind people use when they realize their questions might land on the record. First, the senior counsel said, "Thank you for your cooperation to date, counsel." Cooperation. To date. 3 phrases that told me they were no longer debating whether something happened. They were preparing for what would happen next. They asked where I'd stored the backups. I told them. 2 encrypted drives, 1 off-site. They asked who else knew. I told them. Melissa, our timestamps, the original IT logs. They asked whether I'd spoken to the press. I told them the truth. I hadn't, and I didn't need to. When the call ended, I stared at the ceiling in my quiet living room and felt something I hadn't felt since the day the lobby shattered: uncomplicated relief. Not because I was safe yet, but because the truth had finally made it out of rooms with shut doors. The next morning, my suspension was lifted pending outcome. HR offered a gentle apology that wasn't really an apology. "We're sorry for any distress the process may have caused." Process. As if the wounds were paper cuts. I walked back into the office and noticed how people's faces kept rearranging when they saw me: surprise, then guilt, then something like respect they didn't know how to wear in public. Melissa was at her desk, focused, small. When our eyes met, she gave the faintest nod. We were not friends, not allies exactly, but we were finally standing on a floor that didn't tilt when we spoke. 2 days later, the parent company sent auditors, real ones, the kind whose questions have serial numbers. They took over the glass conference room and set up like they were moving in. Laptops, banker's boxes, a portable scanner that never stopped humming. They called me in, asked narrow questions, and didn't blink when I answered. I learned something then. Truth looks heavier on paper. Once it's printed, no one can pretend it weighs nothing. The house of cards fell methodically. First, the finance trail. Collins Consulting. Vendors were him by another name. Shell invoices routed through a friend's LLC. A handful of people had approved them, some out of loyalty, some out of habit, some because people who sound confident don't get questioned until they should. Numbers don't care about charisma, though. They lined up the way columns do in a spreadsheet and told the same story every time. Second, the emails. IT recovered what he tried to erase. Late-night approvals, pressure on subordinates, edits to Melissa's performance records that made her look incompetent when she'd asked to step back. The timestamps were his handwriting, the tone was his fingerprint. Third, the retaliation. That part wasn't just me. Others had kept their own receipts: calendar removals, project reassignments, lost requests, vague warnings about fit. In any one person's life, it could look like paranoia. In a stack on a table, it looked like a system. The board moved the way big ships do. Slowly at first, then with momentum no one could stop. On a Wednesday, we got an email that read like it had been written by a dozen lawyers. Effective immediately, the company has terminated the employment of the former regional director and several associated leaders following a comprehensive compliance investigation. No names. Everyone knew. Ours department head was transitioning out. 2 managers who had facilitated approvals were no longer with the company. Colin had already filed his appeal. It was denied in a paragraph that didn't even use his first name. And then came something I didn't expect. The company offered to settle with me, in recognition of your cooperation and in acknowledgement of the challenges experienced during the review period. A check, an NDA, a script for moving on. I asked for a weekend. Not to negotiate, just to listen to the part of me that had survived this long without being bought. I drove to the lake that night and sat in the cold with the engine off. The quiet wasn't empty, it had weight. When your life gets small enough to fit inside someone else's paperwork, you forget what it sounds like when nothing demands you justify yourself. I thought about those first days, the glass fishbowl, the laugh that started it, the way my hands shook in the hallway after that first email. I thought about Melissa's face at the diner, about the interns who stopped joking, about the 2 people who'd quit and never looked back. Karma wasn't the fireworks. Karma was the correction. I turned the key, drove home, and wrote a reply. I accepted the settlement, on one condition: that my record reflect not just good standing, but exemplary conduct, and that my statement about retaliation be preserved in the audit file. If they wanted my silence, they could have it. If they wanted to rewrite the history, they'd have to find a different pen. They agreed by morning. My last week felt like moving through an echo of the place I once believed in. People brought cupcakes. Someone made a card. The ones who never spoke to me stopped by to say they always knew something was off. I didn't correct them. You don't need apologies from people who are only brave in hindsight. On my last day, Melissa asked if we could talk. We stepped into the courtyard where the trees still pretended the building was a calm place to work. I'm leaving too, she said. Different industry, far away. I nodded. You'll be good at anything that doesn't demand your silence, she swallowed. Thank you for believing me when I didn't. Thank you for telling the truth when it mattered, I said. We didn't hug. We didn't exchange numbers. Sometimes closure is just 2 people agreeing not to carry the same weight anymore. I cleared my desk in under 10 minutes, 1 mug, 1 plant, a folder labeled "Things I Learned the Hard Way." On my way out, I passed the glass conference room where the auditors had lived for weeks. It was empty now, but the outline of their work remained. Smudges on the table, ghost rings from coffee cups, a taped corner of carpet that would never lie flat again. Some rooms never go back to normal. They shouldn't. At the elevator, a new hire I barely knew hurried up, breathless. Hey, are you the one from the article? I smiled. No one's the one from the article, everyone is. She flushed, nodded, and said, I'm glad you didn't let them make you smaller. Me too, I said. Promise me you won't let them do it to you, either. The doors opened. I stepped in, watched the floor numbers count down, and felt the building release me like something it had no right to keep. I didn't walk into another office right away. I took a contract gig first, remote, quiet, work that didn't require translating my conscience into company speak. I learned to cook again. I slept. I said yes to things that didn't need a calendar invite to be real. A month later, a message arrived from an unknown number. Quick update, you didn't hear it from me, but the board mandated leadership training on retaliation and reinstated back pay for 2 of the people who quit. Also, they're auditing the whole region. P.S. They still won't say your name out loud in meetings. P.P.S. We do. I laughed in my kitchen, a small, private sound that didn't need anyone's approval. People ask me sometimes how it felt to win. I don't think about it like that. Winning is a trophy, this was a boundary. Here's what I know. Retaliation feels powerful while it's happening because it's designed to make you feel alone. Documentation is the antidote to loneliness. Every timestamp, every copy, every calm email you send yourself when your hands won't stop shaking, that's you refusing to disappear. And karma? Karma is just the math that happens when the noise dies down. If you're listening to this on your lunch break, or in your car after another meeting that made your throat burn, take this with you. You are not difficult for remembering what happened. You are not disloyal for expecting the rules to apply to everyone. And you are not powerless just because the people who hurt you have titles. One day, the room will be quiet enough for the truth to be heard. When that day comes, have your notes ready. Have your courage ready. Have your peace ready. You don't have to get even. You just have to get aligned. And when you do, the rest of the story writes itself.